Good.
Back at just a few inches away, Mark. Thank you. What's in here? Do you prefer to stay there?
Good.
Really happy to be with your meditation group today. My name is Deanne and Shinzan. My principal place of formal practice is at Yokoji Zen Mountain Center. That's where my teacher, Tenshin Roshi, and our other teacher there, Jokai Roshi, teach. And how many of you ever been to Yokoji in the San Jacinto Mountains? I remember. Okay, yeah, it's a wonderful place of practice. Last year, Wayu Sensei asked me to come here and speak, and so I discovered this beautiful place, and some of you that regularly come here. So I really want to thank you and thank Wayu Sensei for inviting me to speak today, and for all of you for your gracious help setting everything up and taking on different positions to make this all happen together. Experiencing practice together in the group, in Sangha, in community with one another is really a precious opportunity. I practice alone at home, and it's practice, but it's different than when we're in Sangha together and having that support and the visual representation of how we're all in this together. When I first thought about giving this talk, I had a working title for it. And that was Practice is Where I Am Standing in This Moment. And I will get to that, and I'll talk about that quite a bit today. But as I was preparing it, and after some experiences I had at a meditation retreat at Yokoji last weekend, I realized there was this subtitle that kept rearing its head and wanted to be heard. And that was Exploring the Land of Stuckness. So we're going to do some of that today, exploring the land of stuckness, which also feels less formidable doing it with Sangha together. So here we go. The past few months have been pretty rough for me. And I realized I started to think that in like nautical terms. Like instead of smooth sailing, I felt like I was on really rough seas. Felt like we might capsize at any moment with all the turmoil and chaos going on in our national life. And then noticing how that was getting mirrored within me too. Feeling a lot of turmoil. I think these last few months have presented some of the biggest challenges to my practice than I have felt in quite a long time. Besides what I saw unfolding around me in my country, and to our, what John Lewis called, beloved community. The beloved community. And for me, that also includes people, wildlife, the trees, the mountains and rivers, the beloved community that we are given to be in together. And then there were the fires, which also created stark realization of impermanence, of not knowing, unexpected, and how to live within that. I also had injured my foot. And though it's a minor medical problem, it's part of my human body. So I had a lot of feelings about it, literal feelings in the foot, and then feelings about what is this going to mean? How is this going to limit me? Is this ever going to go away? And then my podiatrist, who I don't believe is a Buddhist practitioner, but he said something that really struck me. He said, on the days that your foot isn't feeling well, you're going to walk like this. You walk kind of slowly and hum. And on the days that your foot is feeling better, you're going to walk like this. You walk confidently around the room. So that was a real lesson to me, not to anticipate, not to think I knew what was going to happen one way or the other, but just be with whatever was happening at that moment. And the national events, I'm certainly now somebody who's like, oh no, she's going to talk about politics. I'm not going to talk about politics, but I'm going to look at the root of that word, politics, which is polis, which means the community, people. And really, politics really means how we have decided we're going to live with one another. So to me, everything's political because we are always deciding how we're going to live with one another and how we're going to live within ourselves. And I was in a lot of turmoil, like I said. My ship analogy was really like I was getting seasick. I was really noticing a lot of fear, uncertainty, sadness, doubt, anger, and feeling like daily I was awakening to news or witnessing more what I considered suffering, willful cruelty almost, destruction and damage, and to things that I value, that I value deeply, things that I have worked for over decades, like environmental protections, like human rights, like the suffering of people who have less resources than I do, for healthcare, for mental health resources, and seeing that being dismantled. Now, in the midst of that, I also heard a lot of stories coming up within me. Like, I knew what shouldn't be done for sure. It was harder to know what should be done, but I was pretty positive that most of my opinions and notions were correct. I also noticed how when I added story to the reality of what was actually happening on the ground, how much more I was increasing my suffering. And I was undoubtedly increasing the suffering. Some of the people that had to be around me too, I'm sure. I did a lot of ranting. I like to not think of it as ranting, just kind of explicating my opinion. But I'm sure it was ranting sometimes, and also might have not been the kind of support that people needed in the midst of such chaos. My sense of agency was really called into question. This delusion that we're in control and that we can have things the way we want them if we just try hard enough. Stability. And then I started noticing in Buddhism, we call greed, anger, and ignorance the three poisons. And I could clearly see greed, anger, and ignorance going on around me. But then I had to look within myself. What greed, anger, and ignorance did I have going on within me in those particular times? That's something that I can do something about. And maybe as I work with that and live with that, I can have some impact in how that plays out in the rest of the world as well. Well, I kept, telling myself what I should be doing, and a Buddhist practitioner, capital B, capital P in quotes, whatever that looks like. And I can hear Tenshin Roshi always saying, practice doesn't have to look like something. Practice really isn't a noun, it's a verb. And it's always in flow, and it's always where we're standing in this moment, in this place. But knowing all that, I still felt a lot of hopelessness and despair. I would be irritated sometimes, and other times feel very sorrowful. And I realized that I was actually grieving. And then I thought, what would I say, or how would I approach somebody that I know who is grieving? It took me a while to get there because I was making a lot of judgment on myself and resisting. I was resisting a lot of my thoughts and feelings. I can't feel despair. That's not who I am. I can't be hopeless because then the people I care about will feel hopeless too. All these stories and all this self-judgment that were going on. I also hear my teacher, Tenshin Roshi, who gave me a very important phrase. What we resist persists. So I kept trying again, to make it work, to tell myself I should knock it off. I should get out of this, that my practice isn't strong enough. I'm not embodying the Buddhist precepts. I mean, like all this stuff. And that I should be able to find a path to calm using everything that has worked for me with this practice before. And I just couldn't seem to make it happen. I would find myself crying unexpectedly, and my body felt uneasy. I still was seeing friends. I was active in doing things that I loved, that had meaning for me, but I still, in my core, felt so very shaken. I always have to remind myself to pause and take a drink of water. When we take the Buddhist precepts and when we chant the 4 vows, we're vowing to save all sentient beings. That's the vow of the Bodhisattva. That's a big job, a really, really big job. We're also vowing to end delusions. And we're told they're inexhaustible. So we're being asked to end something that's inexhaustible. And the dharmas, or the teachings, are boundless, and we're vowing to master them. So when the despair and hopelessness, I think, then brought on eventually a sense of humility. Right, here I am, this one person, thinking somehow I should be beyond or above or whatever, in not having the normal human feelings of grief, of anger, sorrow, frustration. And then I realized when we take those vows, we're not saying we're going to do the impossible. We're saying that we will try to do what we can do in the place that we're standing at any particular moment. And that we will hang in there. We won't just chuck it out because it seems too hard, and that we'll give it our best in whatever way that is, with what presents itself. I've really been thinking of these times. I have Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, compassion. And the depiction of Avalokiteshvara is that she has 10,000 eyes on her hands. And so she has them like this, and she cannot block out and does not want to block out any of the suffering in the world. or the joys in the world. You get to have them both. If you close them, you're not going to get either. And you don't just get to like, that's the hand for sorrows. I'm not going to look at those. I only like the joy hand. They go together. So I thought about Avalokiteshvara, but I realized that I've been imagining her, and in India, Avalokiteshvara also has a masculine avatar as well. I imagined her as calm, always serene, always detached above these feelings that were roiling within me. Didn't imagine her as sad, angry. One evening when I was feeling like really confused and sad about everything that was going on, I emailed a Dharma sister, Shoshin Sensei, who leads the meditation group of Three Treasures in South Pasadena. And I just said, Shoshin, does Avalokiteshvara ever cry? Or does she just look and hear the world suffering with calm and this compassionate equanimity? Shoshin replied very soon, and she said, Shinzan, oh yes, Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva of compassion, cried so many tears of compassion in a Buddhist story while she was witnessing the suffering of all beings while trying to save them. She cried so many tears they formed a lake. That lake then produced a lotus that blossomed into the goddess Tara because of compassion. And in this practice, we have what are called like a turning story, either a koan, or it might be an experience that just turns you from some delusion you've been walking through, and it just turns you, and you realize in a way that you weren't realizing before. So I realized that in judging what I'd been going through for a couple of months, it was really quite arrogant. That somehow I thought I was apart from all the other sentient beings and the bodhisattvas who are dealing with the same kinds of things that all of us are dealing with together. So I felt a lot of humility, and I felt even more love for my favorite bodhisattva, Avalokiteshvara, who cried a lake of tears. And then Shoshin ended by saying, we can find time to talk together. Hang in there. And then she said, take very good and extra good care of yourself. She didn't say like, what's wrong with you, Shinzan? You know, get over it, get out there, save all sentient beings, quick. She said, I'm here for support. Remember who you are, hang in there, and take really good care of yourself. And I realized then too, that's really the only way I can be available to provide support, compassion, empathy toward others, is if I am taking care of myself and affording that to myself as well. The other thing that turned for me, shifted, is rather than that question, what shall I do? You know, what are they doing? You know, the they. So it's not us, it's they. What are they doing? What is going to be done about this? I really realized the question was more how to be rather than do. How do I want to be in the midst of whatever the circumstances are? We all have these preferences. In Buddhism, we say the great way is not difficult. It just avoids picking and choosing. Yeah, try that for 5 minutes, right? I want things to be this way. I don't want them to be that way. these people have it all wrong, my people have it right. A lot of suffering being caused by that. I can't do something about everything that's happening in the world, but I can decide and act from how I want to be. And I can support other people, so they're struggling with that too, and practicing who they are and how they want to be. The judging that I was doing about myself and others, the stories I was telling myself, and the dualistic thinking of me, them, good, bad, good guys, bad guys, right? And we're always the good guys. I just had that cut right through that. And then I really, realized how I had not been honoring my own grieving and my own sadness and taking good care of myself so that I could regain clarity, not certainty. There is no certainty, but regain clarity and not join in the chaos. Because through clarity, we can see, where am I standing in this moment, at this moment in time? What is called for in this moment? And that's what practice is, being wholeheartedly in that place and time, not elsewhere. I just finished a 3-day beginner's mind session at Yokoji Zen Mountain Center. That's my place of practice. I told you, in a beautiful canyon in the mountains. And sometimes when I'm leaving that, I think the same experience I'm having here in this beautiful canyon in the mountains, I can have on the busy freeway in a traffic jam in Los Angeles. That might sound like a stretch. That might sound almost as hard as saving all sentient beings. But by touch, it's like a touch point for me to go there, to be with the teachers, to be with the Sangha, just like being here today is a touch point that helps me remember and helps me go out, helps me hang in there. I love the beginner's mind sessions because they just bring me back to basics. Also, for all of us, it's like we are all beginners. We're all beginners every day. When we wake up in the morning, we're a beginner. And I feel like a beginner when I wake up in the morning, don't you? Sometimes it takes a few cups of coffee before I think, okay, maybe I have a little bit of life experience. But every day we wake up, every moment that we're encountering is really a new beginning. And then the practice of Zazen. And in beginner's mind, there's some people that have never sat Zazen. And so there's a lot of focus on, what is this? What is this? What does it feel like? Why does it work? To quiet the body, to quiet the mind, to notice that you are breathing. Such simple things that we take for granted and that are really the basis of what we need. Quiet the body, quiet the mind. Notice that we are breathing. The first thing that we do when we come into the world in this human form, and the last thing we do as we leave this world in our human form, the breath. And it's there all the time for us. Just kind of saying, be here. You are here. And while sitting, just letting thoughts fall away, letting preferences and stories and delusions fall away. Stop resisting what is there. Might be something like, my butt is sore on the chair, or my neck hurts. Just let it all be there. At the end of session, there was a Dharma talk by my teacher, Tenshin Roshi. And then afterwards, question and answer and discussion period. And I asked him some question. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was about some concern about that period, where I felt so stuck and so frustrated and didn't know how to, or told myself I didn't know how to use my practice to effectively alleviate my own suffering, or what to do about others, suffering of others. And he said to me, and I'm paraphrasing this, he said, stuckness is exactly where you needed to be. That really surprised me, because already I had objectified stuckness and put a label on it as not good. Stuckness, not good, unstuckness, good. He said, stuckness is exactly where you needed to be, because that's where I was. So how could I be any other way but stuck? And it was in stuckness that I was forced to look at what I was doing with the real suffering and possible destruction that I saw going on around me. The real hurting and cruelty that I saw, that we are capable of as human beings, not just those people, but all of us. A lot to sit with, a lot to be with, rather than being with it. That's where my practice was. And again, I'm humbled in what I was forgetting, that that was the place of practice that compelled Shakyamuni Buddha to stop all the things he'd been trying. As he left home, went out in the world, determined to understand this thing of human suffering and what this human life was about. He'd just been exposed after being sheltered in a wealthy enclave with high walls around, so he would never see old age, sickness, or death. And he went outside the walls and he saw sick people, dead people, old people, and said, I want to figure this out. I want to know more about this. And he tried various things in the traditions that he was in at that time in India, which also included asceticism, where he nearly starved himself to death, was very weak, emaciated, so much that he fell in a river. He was going to drown. And he was pulled out by a woman who kept him from drowning, gave him milk to drink, and nurtured him till he got strong enough and said, this isn't working. And he also is credited with saying something like, this one here is a stuck axle wheel. You realize that it's that stuckness. And he vowed that he was going to go sit down under the Bodhi tree and sit there, quieting his body, quieting his mind, for as long as it took to realize the nature of this life that we've been given. And he did. He hung in and he didn't give up. He sat with great determination, letting delusions drop away, ideas of this and that drop away. And then in the morning, he looked up and saw the morning star. That's when he said, I, the world, and all sentient beings are the awakened one to thusness. That we are awake. That doesn't mean that we're some enlightened genius who understands everything in the world. It means we're awake. We're using all our senses. We're being here. We're being here now, in this place, in this moment. And regardless of the circumstances going on around us, we can have that awareness, that appreciation, and move from that point, move from that. This is our life and this is our practice. And there are not two. Practice is not a thing. It is a verb meaning We are living our life, learning every moment more about what it is to be in human form in this world. But I think I'll stop. Take a drink of water and hear what you have to say. Are any questions you might have? Anything that you want to share with one another? And I want to acknowledge the people that are on Zoom. I don't know that I have met you, but I see some of you on there and I see some other names. So thank you so much for being here too.
Thank you for preparing and the elegant talk. It covers so much ground, and taking the time to share it with us. One thought I had, I've been very fond of reading Joko Beck's books.
Yes.
And one question she always asks about these feelings of discomfort or uncertainty or anxiousness or anxiety or whatever it may be is, what's underneath this? And I think that's a great question that I always try to ask myself when I get into those situations. What's underneath this? It usually gets into something about me that I didn't really understand or appreciate. So that enables me to kind of move beyond that stuckness into not knowing at least, or moving back into my process of being present, paying attention, doing my best.
It's huge. And all that we can do. And are you becoming familiar with the stories that routinely pop up? Or have you worn them out by now?
Yeah, kind of. So, obviously the elephant in the room is the Trump administration and all the craziness that's going on. You can speak freely when these are your people. You can permission to speak freely. But I've been around organizing and movement politics for a long time, and I've seen these things come and go. And so that has enabled me to understand that this is part of the ebb and flow, the swinging of the pendulum. We have survived. I mean, I survived the Vietnam War and things that followed with that. And, we thought the world was going to fall apart at that point, various points. So that's also enabled me to appreciate what's going on today in the context of my life, and not to mention world history. So, we're going to be all right. We just have to, like, not. And this is the other problem I find, that people are constantly asking themselves, what do I do? How do I take care of this? I've got to find an immediate answer. Tell me what to do. And I just, the answers are not immediately apparent, nor should they be. These things develop, and to be okay with that, to be okay in developing, and not feel like we always have to respond.
One thing that has been very helpful to me, and I take a lot of teaching from the poets, as well as from Buddhist teachers who are also poets usually. But I take a lot of teachings from the poets, and I love Rumi's exhortation to us to try to love the questions themselves instead of always looking for answers. We need to be asking the right questions, right? Not have the right answers. We can't get the answers if we aren't asking the right questions. And that's within ourselves as well as together as a community. What are the questions? I also had a writer once say, the importance of the artist in our communities is they look at what is not being questioned. So take a look at that, and in your practice too, and within yourself. Look at what's not being questioned. Like, I wasn't questioning that stuckness was a bad thing. I wasn't questioning it, and I kept resisting, so it kept persisting. I was keeping myself more stuck, suffering more. When I let that delusion, that thing that I thought was so certain, go, and I heard the question come up, and Roshi said that to me. Stuckness is exactly where you need to be. So then I asked, oh, why? And it's something that you can look deeply into then and see all the facets of it. And the other thing that you were saying, Mark, it seems like such a simple phrase and maybe even a little trite, but it has helped me enormously. When I see things going on, I'm like, this is incredible. How could this possibly be happening? How could they? We've always behaved these ways. And the phrase, from beginningless time, it has always been thus. That we have great compassion, great ability to hurt one another, great discernment, great confusion. We have it all. And for me, this has been a practice big enough to encompass all of it.
Well, thank you for sharing your experiences. You know, I'm a visual artist. Right now I'm doing like painting and printmaking, but it's really interesting. I thought I could bury myself in my practice. You know, sort of like you get into the zone and everything's okay, but because I'm a visual artist, I also rely upon inspiration. Because otherwise, you know, what are you gonna paint? You know, what's gonna draw you? So what's been happening lately is that I keep having these reoccurring dreams. And I know we have to be careful with dreams. Dreams can be stories, dreams can be delusions, but they all are also messages.
Yes.
And the recurring dreams are wounding of various types, sharp objects, cutting, wounding, bloodshed. And then the other dream I have concurrently within the same night, every time I dream one, I dream the other, is this infant or this new life or this like spark of life, this really, really young baby not even born yet. And so I thought it's interesting. It's sort of like yin yang, you know, the wounding doesn't stop. And I think it's an element of trauma. And it's hard to acknowledge, yes, I'm traumatized. You know, I can make myself feel better, but that doesn't mean I'm still not wounded. So that's one thing. And then this other thing happened this week. My husband is a day trader, so he's always in the market. And it was a very extremely exacerbating week for the market, as you know. And he's also Chinese, and so he has an understanding of what's going on with the trade war between the United States and China. So he was talking to someone, and he said this thing in Chinese. It was like a proverb, and I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "Oh, that's what I'm hearing from overseas. That's their reaction to the Trump tariffs." And I said, "Well, can you put it in English?" And he said, "Well, the closest thing in English is if you give him enough rope, he will hang himself." And I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, but the problem with that is when he hangs himself, he hangs the bond market. You know, if the value of the dollar plummets, we all suffer. We're all hanging. And that is really traumatizing. Uncertainty is very traumatizing for the market. It's the worst thing to do now. So anyway, it all, the wounding, it all makes sense. In a, not that I would sign up for it.
But there's something new emerging in your other dream. There's something new emerging. There's something being born.
Yeah,
And we're not quite sure what it is
Yeah.
at this moment.
yeah,
And that's always true. Those kinds of cycles are going on. We see them in nature. We see them within ourselves and our development as a person. We see it in our institutions. Yeah, and I don't mean to sugarcoat things, but here we are. Here we are. The sun came up this morning. It's going to set this evening. The moon is full. There's stars in the sky. Daryl,
Thinking of the great piece about how your sign, you're tired, you sleep, and you're angry, you yell, and you're happy, you laugh. I mean, these are the kinds of things you get from Zen practice, right? And it's interesting because there's absolutely an appreciation for what's being pointed out. So immediate experiencing, this immediate engagement that comes into shape and form, and as much as it comes into shape and form, it diminishes while it drives anything, right? And what I notice myself, because I think that's where I have to go in that regards, is when I suffer, I'm somehow congealing that process of experiencing that. But I really don't have any control. I mean, sometimes I congeal. Sometimes something hits me in a certain kind of a way where I don't have that freedom and flexibility just to experience and engage with our emotions coming out. Yeah, but the poetry really speaks to it as a, to me, it was a reminder of how I am something special.
yeah. Yeah. Try to love the stuckness itself. Yes. And tell me your name again. Christina.
I just want to say,
It's my honor. Thank you. Yeah.
the story about the Bodhisattva, I really read that with her tears.
Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva.
Yes, and that really spoke to me. Sometimes when I'm on the tree, usually when I'm on the tree, maybe there's like no stressors going on. And when something calm, you know, and you tend to be really peaceful, right? On retreat, there's no upset problem. So you can be in this place of calm, and then you can be love. And then took all of a sudden something comes in the outside world, and I'm in Zen, I shouldn't be in Zen, right? So then, accepting that you are within that even really thought.
Yeah.
That to accept these emotions of where we are, like your teacher said, where we are is where we need to be, and what we exist where we are. I've noticed very so as psychologists too, we know that this is true.
What we resist persists.
But it's so hard sometimes letting it in, because it's so resistant to it. That's the biggest thing, but just that image I thought, I definitely for 2 years on this. Really. Not really.
But it is being okay.
Yeah, exactly. Because it is what it is. Thank you.
You know, another phrase that I really like along the same vein, what you resist persists, is what's in the way is the way.
Yeah, that's how it turned out.
Yeah,
That's what he said. Stuckness is exactly the place you need it to be. And it's the place that Shakyamuni Buddha was that compelled him to go sit down. Just sit down and shut up. I have to tell myself that a lot. I'm sure other people, I think my sister's on there. I'm sure she wants to tell me that sometimes. In a kind way. Just sit down, be quiet. You don't have to know. Enter not knowing. Not knowing. And what not knowing gives us is this vast freedom of possibility. Because you hear what's going on now. Everybody knows this and knows that and has a comeback for that or a comeback for this. What if we just, there was that Rumi poem too, remember? Something like, what if we don't move our arms around so much? And what if we do not speak? We'll find each other in this sudden strangeness